Gary Stone would go on to work with several other interesting apes, including a gorilla named Harambe.
The potentially terrifying intelligence of the orangutan. I know absolutely nothing about orangutans.
Giant ginger tree hippies don't always choose peace, but in 2014,
I'm
one
kind of
shocked
ginger.
scientist when she
My
not only
model.
orchestrated the life canceling of another, she essentially hired a hitman to do it. The hairy honey trap was executed by a young female named Condor, and the victim was a mother 20 years older named Sidoni. Living in the swamp forests of Indonesia's Mawas Reserve, the two had beef going back all the way to 2009, with Condor curiously approaching Sidoni's at the time 7-year-old daughter, and Sidoni defensively smacking and biting Condor before chasing her off. The perceived insolence stuck with Condor, and the disrespect was tattooed into her psyche. She was not letting that slide. Years later, Condor would catch the eye of a male named Echo, and the two would eventually run into Sidoni. They both approached, and Echo seemed to inspect Sidoni, who was now jockeyed by her 4-year-old son. Echo seemed curious in the mother, before losing interest and proceeding to mate with Condor, right in front of Sidoni. Call it passion or power play, but either way.
What age are orangutans adults? I know years are so different for animals. What age is an adult?
When Sidoni tried exiting the situation, Condor escalated, ending the lovemaking and savagely beating Sidoni. But what blew researchers away was Echo going from bystander to participant. For 33 minutes, the two took turns beating on Sidoni, sometimes together, sometimes just Condor, with Echo blocking off any escape routes. It was an honest to ape jumping, and his much larger canines meant Echo inflicted the bulk of the damage. The pair didn't stop until a fourth orang, a male named Guapo, chased Echo off and ran defense for Sidoni before mating with her. The Orange Night would be too late, as a little over 2 weeks later, Sidoni became past tense due to her injuries, and scientists were left wondering what they had just witnessed. In over 26,000 hours of observation, only 6 female and female attacks were recorded, and none caused serious injuries. Yet here was a spiteful orang leveraging her carnal currency, specifically to erase one of her rivals, and Echo acting as a hired gun. Premeditated and personal, it was a shockingly dark look into the intelligence of the forest man, one that begs the question, just how smart are they, and just what could they be capable of? To say orangutans are intelligent is honestly disrespectful, because this tree-happy ginger ape is damn near human. That is an animal that can 100% speak. They just really don't want to deal with taxes. And that's only partially a joke. Their name, Orangutang, literally translates to man of the forest, because locals swore they were plus-size people that chose not to speak because they know then they'd have to get jobs. In 2014, a court in Argentina actually granted human rights to Sandra the orangutan after 20 years of captivity.
How does that
There's a
work?
cute saying that goes, if you give a chip a screwdriver, it'll use it as a weapon. A gorilla would accidentally break it. A bonobo would become the screwdriver, but an orangutan, he'd hide it, use it to dismantle his cage, and then let all his friends out. There's a bunch of reasons for this brainy Bigfoot, and one of them is them being the biggest mama's boys on Earth. No other mammal spends more time with its mother, except humans. In the up to and often over 10 years of being her shadow, baby orangs learned everything about how to orangutan. Not only that, but daughters often live around their moms even after having their own baby. This means orangutans are one of the few animals that have a legitimate culture, and what we see is a sum of generational wisdom passed down. In 2022, a notorious Sumatran male named Raucus was seen using a medicinal plant to help heal a face wound he'd gotten in a fight. The 30-something-year-old applied the chewed-up paste of the akar kuning, an anti-inflammatory, antibacterial flowering plant traditionally used to treat malaria and diabetes. Raucus applied the paste for 7 minutes until it covered his wound, and 5 days later, it was completely healed. It's not the first time we've seen animals self-medicate. Parrots will eat clay to detox from all the leaves, and elephants will apparently eat certain plants to induce labor. But what made Raucus so radical is the simple fact that they rarely eat that plant to begin with. There's more evidence of orangs self-medicating with the same plants used by locals, and it's likely this knowledge was taught, and not by humans. Mothers will even teach their young to have the same preferences for food, so that when they get older, they can forage in the same area without directly competing with all the other mother-child pairs. Another thing this citrus simian is smart enough to understand is calculated reciprocity. In this viral video, you see this man Vitaly trade snacks with a zoo orangutan. Not only did the hairy haggler refuse until he understood that he'd be getting something back, I swear you can see him check for zookeepers. If it sounds like a stretch, it's scientifically proven this untaxable entity understands the concept. 2 orangutans at the Leipzig Zoo in Germany were given 3 different tokens and quickly learned that they could exchange one type for bananas for themselves. The second token type would earn bananas for the other orang, and the third type had no monetary value whatsoever.
They're gonna choose the one that gives them the bananas, right?
At first, the female, Doc, had no problem exchanging tokens to get the male, Bim, bananas.
Really?
But Doc realized Bim wasn't really returning the favor, so she became a lot less generous. That gave Bim enough of an attitude adjustment to start trading his tokens more until their efforts became closer to equal. There's another story of a zoo orangutan taught to exchange any trash he found in his enclosure for a food reward. Except he then realized if he just returned the trash in pieces, that would just mean more food for him, which was unfortunate when the trash was someone's phone, and tragic when it turned out to be a formerly alive possum. But what exactly is it that makes orangutans so smart? Well, the superpower is how they learn. When orangutans are spending all that time with their mothers, they learn everything they need to by watching and copying. Even after they leave, young males will find an older, flanged male to use as a role model, learning how to be an alpha male by mimicking everything he does. Mimicry is how they learn, and that learning creates cultures. It's scientifically proven when resources are good, orangs spend more time around each other and more time peering, watching, observing the other orangs. It's not just people watching, it's gathering intel, and they don't just do it to each other. Orangs regularly learn things just by watching the humans around them. This male—
Who would have give that thing a saw? That feels like such a bad idea. I barely trust adult humans with a saw. Why are we giving an orangutan one? What? That's a bad idea.
This male was seen attempting to catch fish after clocking locals doing it. And one female, Supina, tried starting a fire by dipping a glowing stick in kerosene, blowing on it, and even rubbing it with another stick. But this shadow clone jutsu can be wildly inconvenient. Camp Liki is an orangutan research and rehabilitation reserve where the auburn apes have plenty of opportunities to study humans right back, leading to the trend of orangutans untying canoes from the dock and stealing them, and not even triple or quadruple knots can discourage them. Fun fact, it takes about a 7-hour canoe ride to get to camp, so one documentary crew decided to save time with a speedboat. They lost that time after a redman stole the boat and left them stranded. The power of perception has taught orangs how to breastfeed, drive, and even saw wood, all from watching a human. It said orangs have the intelligence of a 4-year-old, but I've yet to see a toddler that did its own laundry. Now you're seeing what I'm saying. Bro's smart enough to talk, wise enough not to, and she's only song like that so we don't catch.
How do people estimate animal brain to human? Like what category, what changes from like a 4-year-old animal capacity to like a 7-year-old animal capacity? Like what? Because don't birds have like, at least like ravens have like 7-year-old brains, like in comparison to humans? How do we distinguish that? What test do we run?
John, what if I told you there's an even higher level of intelligence they can get to?
Okay.
Deception. Deception requires foresight and anticipating the actions or thoughts of another party. That's where intelligence can get scary. If orangutans have the capacity to trick us, we're talking about a whole different ballgame. Which brings us to the story of Fu Manchu. Now we're talking about an orangutan outsmarting humans, and it happened in the 60s in Omaha Zoo in Nebraska.
Okay.
I know, nothing ever happens in Nebraska. One day, Zoo
I
Director
know
Jerry
nothing
Stone
about
was
Nebraska.
doing his rounds when a couple keepers ran up to him. Panicking, they told him not 1, but 5 orangs had escaped and were roaming the zoo. This was not good. Like all apes, an orang outside is a code red situation, and a starting lineup of them walking amongst people was a canon event begging to happen. All it would take was a human or orang getting too curious for it to be a bad time for everyone, and Jerry sprinted to them before anything could happen, and he found them just chilling. Yeah, Jerry was greeted by 5 fugitives just people watching in the elm trees by the elephant building. Clearly all they wanted to do was visit the zoo like everyone else. But you can't just have several hundred pounds of primate in public unsupervised. So Jerry literally went up the tree, grabbed an orang by the hand, and led them all back to the exhibit with no resistance. Jerry was less gentle with his staff, and let it be known that another mistake like that and someone would get pink slip straight into unemployment. Clearly Stone made his point, because nothing like that would ever happen again. Until next week, when it happened again. Yup, somehow, some way, orangutan gang got out again. No one got hurt. They actually went to the exact same spot in the trees. But a troop of tangerine men exercising free will is a nightmare for zoo PR. And this time, Jerry was ready to give someone permanent PTO. Because no shot someone went through all that school in debt just to not close a furnace door. So imagine what went through Jerry's mind when the tans got out again. But this time, there was a catch. I used to think you'd only hear this line in a movie, but nah, someone actually ran up to Jerry and said, "You gotta come see this." And he wasn't wrong. You see, in the orangutan exhibit, there was a moat, and down at the bottom of that moat was a furnace door. And sure enough, they caught one of the males, Fu Manchu, fiddling with the door. They were watching from a distance so Fu wouldn't see them, but they couldn't see exactly what Fu was doing. All they knew was suddenly the door flew open and Usain Bolt felt a disturbance as these men broke the sound barrier running down to stop them. So now the solution was simple: clear the enclosure of anything that could be used to escape and do it daily. And sure enough, the orang breakouts came to an end. For about a week until it happened again. Jerry wasn't even mad, just tired. Remember, he was a zoo director, and these Mandarin menaces were monopolizing his life. And it was while perp-walking Fu Manchu, who just had to have the biggest eating grin. Jerry noticed a glimmer out the corner of his mouth. He pulls it out, and it all becomes clear. Out was a 4-inch piece of wire bent like a horseshoe that Fu Manchu had stashed between his lower lip and gum. The very hairy Houdini had been using it as a lockpick for weeks and hiding it in his oral wallet. No one taught Fu. Not only did he orchestrate his own emancipation, he had the foresight to realize he couldn't have the key out around keepers or else it'd get confiscated. Fu Manchu would be named an honorary member of the Locksmith Union of the United States, and Jerry Stone would go on to work with several other interesting apes, including a gorilla named Harambe.
Okay, before he says that, that is impressive. That's gotta be more than like a, what do you say, a 4-year-old's brain? Like that's impressive.
Fu Manchu wouldn't be the last, or arguably the most creative. 27-year-old Carta used a stick to short-circuit an electric wire, and then used a bunch of sticks as a ladder to climb out her enclosure. She then just sat and enjoyed the view for 30 minutes until her keepers pulled up with tranquilizers, at which point she just went back in. Last year, Kimbali broke out of an $11 million habitat in Toronto by cartwheeling past a wire barrier. Mind you, that habitat opened up the summer before. Bo flexed on them 11 million ways. The important thing is, in none of these cases do you see an orang get out with malicious intent. Most times they just cosplay as people. But what if one did have beef and use his powers for malfeasance? This is Ken Allen. It's the most famous name in orangutan lore, and you wouldn't even know the name if his mother Maggie had succeeded in smothering him before he even got it.
I've never heard of this story. Have y'all?
He named after the 2 zoo officials that would raise him instead, Ken Willingham and Ben Allen. As a baby, he'd soft launch his shenanigans by regularly unscrewing the bolts of his crib and dismantling it. And once he got too big for a crib, keeper Joanne Thomas would take him around the zoo in a stroller, a decision that arguably cost the zoo thousands. 5 days after moving into his new enclosure, June 13, 1985, Ken climbed a wall and got out. Years before, folks caught Ken building a DIY ladder out of some branches. One thing I didn't mention is living in the trees full time means orangutans literally make their beds every single night. Up to 20,000 in a life. Clearly the craftsmanship carries on. Ken Allen spent his freedom wandering the zoo, taking pictures with patrons before getting escorted back. Not a great thing to happen, but no one got hurt, the wall he scaled got extended, and surely this wouldn't happen again. July 29th of that year, Ken found a way out again, but this time, his intentions weren't pure. You see, there was another orang, Otis. Ken did not like Otis. Ken hated Otis. He hated him so much that they actually had to be separated, because orangs might be an endangered species, but as long as they were roommates, Otis was an endangered individual. So when Ken escaped a second time, he went straight for Otis's corner and chucked rocks at him. That premeditated stoning put him in solitary confinement, but I'm sure Ken will tell you it was worth it. But the reason for the beef might have been jealousy. Otis was the breeding star of San Diego with nearly 10 kids and 3 wives. Ken hated him as a concept, so the zoo gave him 4. And of course that backfired when Ken started teaching them how to disrespect infrastructure too. One day, someone left a crowbar in the enclosure, and instead of using it while everyone watched, he just tossed it aside like he didn't even care. An actual orang move, except he threw it to a female named Vicky, and she used it to pry open a window and free them both. Otis wasn't the only victim. Apparently he took offense to a TV crew filming a documentary on gorillas and pelted them with rocks until he ran out of rocks and started using cannonballs from his colon. Ken was so crafty, employees would only have a chance of studying him if they dressed like regular guests, cause Ken would never incriminate himself if someone in uniform was around. Ken would break out a few more times, never hurting anyone except Otis. He did once approach a child and mumble, "No one will ever believe you," before walking away. And if you doubt that, your disbelief makes his legacy stronger. His legacy was he cost the zoo over $40,000 in zoo enhancements, undercover surveillance, electric wiring, and even hired rock climbers to find every possible finger, foot, and toe hold. But he likely made that back and more, with
Definitely.
all the PR Ken Allen brought to the zoo, just by being himself. But except for Otis, who, let's be real, must have done something to deserve it, Ken Allen never used his intellect to inflict violence. Bro just wanted a vibe. But what could an orang with a human grudge do? There's a story of an orangutan actor hating his trainer and waiting until the two were alone up in a tree, where Pierre strangled his human op and threw him to the ground. But the only proof is the obscure article I couldn't find a source for. Plus, Pierre was probably in the right. Now, Joe's revenge was more than just a story. Joe was an orangutan that appeared in over 100 movies by 1919.
Damn.
This was a time where there were no laws against capturing, selling, and even killing wild orangutans. Universal Studios would take full advantage, and as cute as he was as a toddler, things changed once he became a teen. There would be several incidents with Joe, including a lawsuit where a security guard claimed Joe had mauled him with over 40 bites. There was another time he escaped, and when police pulled up to catch him, Joe stole an officer's gun. But the most infamous case was Joe breaking out of the Universal Zoo, serving straight chaos for 3 days, and even releasing 15 wolves and his elephant friend Charlie on the way out. But Joe did seem to have a code. Not only did he never attack women or children, he'd often defend them. One scene had an actor pretend to spank a child, but because Joe don't play pretend with the little ones, the orang went O-line and leveled the guy. Another scene had Joe's character help rob a lady, but when good guy Joe saw the villain looming over her, Joe folded his clothes, with him in them. By 1924, Joe was retired from show business after being deemed too dangerous to work with. Yeah, I ain't gonna lie, it's Team Joe over here. But there's an even darker side to orangutans. So dark that I'ma just drop this. Here's an ad while you consider your options. Birute Galdeques is a primatologist and one of the leading experts on orangutans, and in the 70s, she arrived at Camp Liki in Tanjung Puntin National Park, where she was immediately warned by native Indonesians that some male orangutans can find humans attractive and occasionally physically and forcefully act on it. She didn't believe it until a male walked into camp one day and violated a female cook, and even multiple people trying to wrestle him off couldn't stop the salacious onslaught. It's now advised that menstruating women either avoid orangs or walk around with a club. So as you can see, orangutans are capable of anything.
Why do so many animals
zoo escapes all the way to premeditated census layoffs. But honestly, they could and should be way worse. An orangutan has never been on record murking a man, and some have had very good reasons. Joe Martin had every good reason, and the fact that he died with no body says more about his kind. The strong mom bond means Joe's mom was almost certainly destroyed for him to be taken. Joe suffered all manners of neglect, including electrical burns from wires, eye damage from the constant stage lights. He was given cigars and alcohol which ruined his health, and he was even knocked out by former heavyweight James Jeffries, all without never really interacting with another orang. Joe going through all that and never severely maiming someone is our entire relationship with orangs in a nutshell. We have done far more to them than for them, in worse ways than you think.
That kind of applies to most animals, unfortunately.
And even say what this one went through. Just know her name is Pony, and her story is not for the weak. Orangutans as a whole are a victim of humanity, and the worst part is what happens when they're gone. Once all the orangs in an area are gone, all the generational knowledge of how to live there dies with them. It's not just a species, it's an entire culture that goes extinct, with no way of bringing it back. So what can you on your phone, computer, or TV do? One is obviously support an organization that helps with research and rehabilitation, which is why I'll be donating to Orangutan Foundation International, founded by Galdeques herself. Link down below if you'd like to as well. Also, never support a place that uses orangutans as tourist traps. Any place
or most animal cafes of that sort are probably bad.
You pay to play with an orangutan is a huge red flag. But probably the best way is to avoid palm oil. Palm oil is the leading cause of their extinction, and it's in 50% of household products in the West. It's a commitment, but it's looking like we either give up the oil or negotiate the red ape's existence. The choice is yours. Just know the orangutans would probably do the same for us. But yeah, that's gonna do it for this video. Drink water, hug your mother. If an orangutan hits you, apologize, because you deserved it.
Hell yeah. Be good to animals. Yeah. If you made it this far and you haven't subscribed already, what are you doing? Do it. And like, subscribe, comment down below.